Hello, everybody. Welcome to Danger Mouth. So we're still going, despite the lack of audience, but we don't care because we know, in the end, our awesomeness will be appreciated. Isn't that true, Darrell?
It is, yeah. It's always plant seeds today for 20 years down the road. Everything will be fine.
Yeah. So after we die, people recognise
I still
what
get
this
emails from
is.
people. I still get emails from people. I had one last week.
But
Go
what's
on.
really exciting is we've got a super good guest.
Yeah.
And he's a very interesting fish because he's a lawyer. And I'm very interested in lawyers. So we'll be delving into that. So his name is Olly Buxton. And he is also known by the moniker the Jolly Contrarian. Which so how did we come across him? Because he's not one of our old friends from our old friend basket. His new friend. And I was looking on the internet, researching in my very lightweight way, complex systems, and I came across his Jolly Contrarian blog, and I thought, this is not your average lawyer. So I asked him to come on the podcast, and he's so extraordinarily brave that he actually did that. So congratulations. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone, and Mike and Darrell. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
No, we are honoured. We are honoured, sir. Anyway, what am I talking about? So this is what they say in other podcasts. They say, we like to know a bit about your background and where you came from to give us a sense of who you are. So when you were 8-year-old, if I asked you what you wanted to be when you grow up, would you say, I'd like to be a derivatives lawyer?
No.
Really?
I wanted to be a pilot.
Oh, God. You are like Darrell. Go on, Darrell, own up here.
Well, I nearly became a pilot, yeah. I nearly joined the RAF and then the Navy. But fortunately, I didn't. I don't think I would have coped with the discipline, honestly, but I love planes.
Yeah, I was the same. And I liked airports too. I had a book about airports and just everything about them, and Vore beacons and even how the baggage handling system worked. This is the 1970s.
So do you watch those terrible programs about airports? Did you do that?
Well, I reckon this was before that. This was in the 70s. We didn't have fly on the wall documentaries back there, probably just as well.
No, but since they've come out, has that passion remained? Have you actually sought them out? And
yeah, I think it's been blunted by spending a bit too much time at Stansted Airport and Gatwick.
Right. So did you pursue that desire to fly in the air and be in control?
No, never did it. I mean, it's like 8 years old, right? And I would have said at the time I left university, I probably wanted to be a musician, and so I sort of thought, well, I'll go to uni, do a bit of something sensible, keep mum and dad happy, and it's always something to fall back on if the music career never takes off. And music career never took off, funnily enough, and here I am.
Did you give it a go?
No, not really. Do you know, I was in a band with a guy who did. And so by way of a little bit of extra background, this is in New Zealand, like Christchurch, New Zealand, so about as far away from the music industry worldwide as you could possibly be. And so I was in a band with a guy, and he did drop out and he actually got a recording contract and toured Europe with a band called Love's Ugly Children. They were great. They were sort of quite a sort of hard rock sort of punk band. But and so he was about as successful as a New Zealand musician could be. But I'd always see him, and whenever we still see each other from every now and then, we always say, "I wish I did what you did."
So, are you still jealous of what he did?
Only intellectually, because I've got a band, and when I play in front of my mates. Everyone's drunk, they have a great time, and I can go home and I don't have to pay the rent with it, So
I've always figured it's a big mistake it's a big mistake sometimes to turn your hobby into profession, because it can, if you're just doing it to make money, and it's generally a desperate way to make money. It's like canoeing, yeah, because I like canoeing. But I always thought, well, it's just going to be so miserable. You're just taking all these beginners out on a bloody lake day after day after day, and
You've also got water coming down your arms on the oar when you go canoeing as well. So my other rock and roll. So the other thing I remember, which made me really quite pleased that I didn't pursue the rock and roll lifestyle. So in London, many years later, young kids had a birthday party for 3-year-olds, right, in North London here. And there's a couple of guys who are the entertainment, and they're the rock and roll pirates. And they're these two fellas, and they'd be in their like mid-50s at the time. Or I thought this is a good 15 years ago now. And I remember saying to one of the other parents, I reckon those two boys have been around a little bit. They look like they did their time in the 70s. Maybe they're roadies or something like that. And anyway, and so they were doing the thing, and the kids were they were doing the wheels and the bus go round and round. And the kids were playing on the triangle and the castanets and whatnot. Anyway, everyone had a great time. Rock and roll pirates. And I went out, and on the way out, I said to one of the guys, "You played a bit? You've been around the industry a little bit, haven't you?" And he goes, "Yeah, I have a bit, but he definitely has. He was a session musician, this guy." And I'll go, "Oh, right. Who did you play for?" And he goes, Bowie." I went, "What?" I said, what did you do? He said, "I was a keyboard player. I played on one of Bowie's albums." And I said, "Oh, which one?" I'm a Bowie fan. "Which one?" He goes, "Oh, you wouldn't have heard of it." I said, "Go on, try me." He said, "It was called Scary Monsters and Super Creeps." This guy played the keyboard on Ashes to Ashes. And there he is, the rock and roll pirate. I mean, I might be imagining that, but it was definitely Scary Monsters and Super Creeps, session musician, wound up entertaining 3-year-olds. So,
blimey.
Well, so I'm following a chap from Florida who's paddling around the whole of the British Isles at the moment, and he just crossed over to the Isle of Man from the Lake District. And I said to him, "Well done. Say hello to the Bee Gees for me," because there's the statues of the Bee Gees there, because that's where they're from. And he replied, "Who were the Bee Gees?" So, but I have heard of David Bowie. But Darrell used to spend, from a very early age, he never really admitted to this, but you wanted to be like right for the NME or something like that, didn't you?
I would have, yeah. I was kind of hankered to be a musician, but was never really good enough. So then writing about music was another possibility. So I've probably written, they've not gone anywhere, but probably about 3,000 record reviews, because I was going to do this before the internet came along. I was going to do this encyclopedia of every album ever recorded. And fortunately, I could see the internet was coming in the horizon and figured I'm going to I'm going to get squashed here by everybody else.
There's a guy that's done like 1,000, the history of music and 1,000 records. I don't know if you've ever heard his podcast. It's great, and sounds like he's done what you decided not to do.
Is that the Rick Beato stuff?
I don't know what the guy's. It's just called a history of music, and he's a northerner. He's a Brit, Manchester guy from Manchester.
Right. Okay.
Just chats away.
I'll check him out.
Right. Okay. Now we've got that out of the system. I shall tell you why I never wanted to be a lawyer. Well, A, they wouldn't have me because I wasn't clever enough. But apart from that, the thing I like about science is the whole method of science, okay? But when you're lawyering, are there any real first principles in lawyering? Because at the end of the day, how do you know whether you're right or wrong? It's the person who wins the best story wins. That's my opinion of it.
That's the same with science, though, right?
Well, yes and no. Yes and no.
I think it all depends how much of a time scale you put on things. So I think in the short term with science, you're absolutely right that whoever shouts the loudest wins, and things only move on when a scientist or a generation of scientists die. and a new generation can come along and say, actually, it's this way. But I'm going to kind of guess that happens in law as well, right?
Yeah, it definitely does, and it's interesting actually. I've there's a conference coming up that I'm speaking at in a month's time or so, and I'm talking about the history of in-house work. So one thing is there's whole lot of different lawyers, right? You have criminal lawyers and civil lawyers and commercial lawyers and family lawyers and all that sort of stuff. But you've also got in-house lawyers and private practice lawyers. So most people, when they think about a lawyer, they think of a guy in a horsehair wig or whatnot. That's a barrister or someone at a firm of solicitors, right? That's what you call a private practice lawyer. But then there's an entire sort of new generation of in-house lawyers who have got exactly the same solicitors qualifications, but they work for a company. And this is a sort of phenomenon that's evolved and played out over about 40 years, I'd say. So early 90s, when these big corporates started to think, hell's bells, we're spending a lot of money on our external legal advice, and there's this translation error. These guys speak in Latin, we don't understand what they're saying. So if we get someone inside that's working for us that can, they can basically sort wheat from chaff and economize and that sort of stuff. And so the legal department in a firm went from one sort of old grey ashen fellow in a cardigan that used to prepare board minutes to in the investment banks literally a weaponized group of 1,000 or more lawyers.
Wow. Right.
And so that's been a big change, and there's something going on right at the moment which I think is going to or may have quite a significant impact on where that goes from now, and that's this Post Office Horizon inquiry that's going on. I don't know if you've been following that. This business about masters, which is an absolute travesty in so many ways. But one of the fascinating things about it is that Post Office had this very big legal function, and they had a legal prosecution function in house, and they had these barristers and solicitors and all sorts of people prosecuting this, and all of these people, and I don't think there's any suggestion that there was anyone was motivated by malice, but all of these people between them perpetrated this terrible injustice on a number of people, and there's quite a lot of internal thought about what happened, how did they miss the trick, and is there not a principle of abstract justice that lawyers are, sacredly bound to observe, and did they miss that? And of course, the interesting thing is that actually that there are abstract principles of justice that we all learn about, but the English legal system and most legal systems are adversarial. So lawyers engage on one side or other, and they're always making an argument about something. And whereas a private practice lawyer, so a normal solicitor, whoever walks in the door, they'll make an argument for, and so they've got a sort of an element of balance about that. When you're an in-house lawyer and you're working for the post office or working for Barclays Bank or whoever you're working for, you have one client the whole time, and you are undertaking that client's corporate purpose, and so there is this enormous sort of, and this is where it comes to systems, because I know that this podcast about systems. You have this enormous complex system operating there with all of these people functioning, and they all got their own individual agendas and corporate agendas and so on and so forth. And you can see what's happened here is that somebody said, well, there's a lot of fraud in the system and we've got to stamp it out. We found some fraudsters, and they're all just proceeding, and there's nobody acting as a sort of a brake on anybody else or putting up their hand and going, hang on, is this all right? Because they're all incentivized the same way, which is to get to the same outcome. So that's quite an interesting evolution in legal, in the legal industry right now.
Are you implying, Ollie, that that's going to the Horizon case is going to affect how the corporate law world works? Then is it as significant as that?
Well, it may do. I think it's certainly going to give people pause for thought about, what is the role of an internal lawyer. And it's an interesting thing. Like I work in financial service industry, like derivatives and whatnot. And in the financial service industry, a compliance officer is a regulated role, and it's sanctioned by the FCA, and it's, you've got to pass. I'm not sure you've got to pass exams, but you've got to be a fit and proper person, and there's a regulatory role to it. The general counsel, who's the equivalent of a pure legal role, it's not really a defined thing, and so there's a bit of a question about what does this mean, and are we actually hiring these people to be a bit of an internal moral compass and to push back against push back against things. The other interest, there's a sort of a side issue going on as well, which is quite interesting, because this is all, of course, came through in the process of criminal prosecutions of these poor sub postmasters, and of course the post office appointed external counsel, external lawyers and barristers to prosecute these things. And so ordinarily, when you're a litigation lawyer, litigation lawyers are protected by this thing called litigation privilege, so legal professional privilege, and nothing that they say to their clients can be revealed to anyone else, and it ever gets discovered in court proceedings and things like that. So, another interesting change in everybody's lives has been that, the technologization of everything, and the technologization of text means that there is no communication that can't be found and revealed before a court now. And that's a big, for an in-house lawyer like me, that I'm not really, I don't have a great deal of protection from privilege. Everything I do at any point can be shown before court, and so lawyers are instructed to be very careful about what they write down and how they couch things. And there's an element, a question as to whether that's maybe contributed to this post office thing as well. But at any rate, at one point there was some legal advice that was coming in from the external lawyers to the post office, which was extraordinarily aggressive and unwise. I don't want to say anything more than that, but it was just jaw-dropping what these people were writing. And it's like, how could any lawyer who's paid any attention over the last 20 years put something like that in writing? But of course, these people are operating under this cloak of privilege, and so there's a question of, is that actually how the litigation world works? And these people are writing these terrible things down. Right. And of course, this only came out because the post office has been sort of shamed into waiving all of its privilege and putting everything that it's got before the court, and it's given up all of its privilege. I should say the inquiry, not the court. So then, I would just wonder whether there are going to be some real debates internally about how do we do things, and is it right?
So let's try and unpick some of those things. So, as you said, there's a complex system, and something was going wrong with it, and the system generally wins. There was probably lots of very honourable people and not so honourable in that system, but they all got sucked in to going in the wrong direction. Which is, groupthink, lack of mental diversity, which I guess the lawyer world is not famous for its extreme diversity, to put it that way.
I think as I said a few minutes ago, there was no malice there. I mean, it feels like an iconic case of what Dan Davis was writing about in the Unaccountability Machine.
Yeah.
That you've chopped out some feedback loops, so the truth never makes it all the way back to the people that need to know that information.
Absolutely right. And I see you've got his book on your shelf behind you, actually, there. And accountability sinks as well. Perfect example of accountability sinks. And so, because there's so many people making micro decisions, and it's siloed up in a way, and everyone's got their little world that they're part of, no one's responsible for anything. It was really fascinating to see that, how that unwrapped.
Yeah. So what are your views on how you get out of that? I mean, it just feels like you've got to blow the whole system up, or you're stuck with it forever.
Yeah, no, that's a tremendously good question. And I think part of it is just people having to be, there needs to be a little bit more grit in the system. Right. And so, coming back to Mike's point about the lack of diversity. So there's a massive lack of cognitive diversity in the system. There's no shortage of other kinds of diversity. Actually, it's incredibly society, but cognitively, absolutely so. And in fact, in the financial services, even more so, because people tend to be from the same universities, and they've all trained at the same law firms and done the same things. And we've got this situation where one has to be polite in a really dysfunctional way. One's not allowed to offend anybody or say, banter's not allowed anymore. You know what I mean? And so
really?
Absolutely. It's you're cancelled if you say anything that's kind of aggressive, let alone off color in any way. And it's a really, really important thing everyone wants mental safety, psychological safety and this sort of thing. But the reality is, in an organization that's doing big, important things, people should be stressed and they should be pushed and there should be grit and they should feel like that they've had a tussle. And sometimes having a tussle and being challenged and having people stand up and have a bit of a stand-up argument is really, really refreshing and exhilarating as well. As well as just making sure you do have that internal argument and internal debate that stops that group thing.
Right, so we're pushing an open door there, but coming back to my point about how do you tell you're doing the right thing, and we're great believers in stories, okay, so you don't need to but at the end of the day, if you're a scientist and you're making a computer work, somebody says, well, this is my theory, and someone says, this is my theory. The one with the correct theory will get a working computer, okay? Whereas contract law or whatever, my guess is, well, knowing anything about it, and then that never stops me, is that you get all these people writing contracts, and that you're like building these walls around your little warlord kingdom, the company, yeah, and the lawyers are your defence, and sometimes your attack as well against other organisations. But generally, putting that fence up is enough to scare people away, and they say, well, they've got a big enough fence, they've got 1,000 lawyers in their department, we can't be asked, because it's just going to be pouring money to the intermediaries. So, and if you're writing all these contracts and they're never bloody tested, how do you know if they're any good? And when they are tested, half the time you don't go to court because you settle out of court, and even that depends on whether the judge is asleep or whether he's right wing or left wing, or he likes your face. You win or you lose. You see what I mean? You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So look, there's no shortage of people willing to pay agents' fees to document contracts. To be clear, it's the amount of money that the big law firms, the Magic Circle, or big law as they call them in the US, make, is just continually raises. It's sort of like its own cosmological constant. My own view
that's the system, though, isn't it? Because
that's absolutely right.
You've got all these parents who want to give them this kind of upper middle class life, who then send to university and pour a fortune into their education. They come out of university in America with 200 grand debts, and then they're pushed into firms where their job is to build things like crazy. I've read some of the John Grissom books. That's my education in lawyerness.
I don't know.
It just sounds like hell.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw just this week the latest new qualified salaries for Linklaters staff were published, and it's something like £180,000 sterling. So that is the starting salary of a kid that has just come out of uni and has had a couple of years doing a training contract, and you've got your training wheels off. You know, you're on your bike for the first time. That's what you're trying to. And you know, the overheads of these firms are not small, right? They've got big offices in the middle of big cities and stuff like that. So and the recovery rates they need to get off these guys are large. They need to earn a lot of money out of them. And so what you're doing is having you know, junior staff that really don't know anything and that are being charged out at £600-700 an hour, and then their work is being checked by someone else in the firm at £900 an hour, or a partner even more than that. And the work product's not great. It just really isn't. It isn't very good. And sort of to come back to your question about the contracts and what do the contracts all mean. I mean, not to go all sort of sociological on you here, but actually, a contract that you have to look at once it's signed is a contract that's failed, and a contract that you litigate on. Right. Something's gone very, very wrong. So the idea about a contract is to articulate for the record what we've agreed that we're both going to do, and then we go and do it. And you know, that's a human informal reaction. That's its own little complex system. And if something goes wrong, or my expectations aren't being met in the course of our transaction or our relationship or whatever we've contracted to do, I'll call you and we will work it out. And we, you know, there's all kinds of informal, social, cultural things that we'll do to keep this show on the road. And no one will go back and look at the contract and say, you know, what are my rights under here and here and here.
Sorry, Ollie, sometimes when you're moving away from your microphone, you're fading out quite badly.
Thank you.
So, yeah, you're getting too animated. It's too excited, mate. So
I'm working with a company in Canada at the moment where it's a relatively small company. They've been in that situation where they've agreed contracts with suppliers, and they've done it through the legal profession. And I don't think the company's understood it in the spirit that you just described it, Ollie. So when things have gone wrong, the first port of call has been to the lawyer. And as soon as you've got lawyer talking to lawyer, then it seems like you know, that conversation that should have had that said, look, we can sort this out. No, is no longer taking place, and it's lawyers sending letters to each other. Which, I mean, it's I love what you said about, you know, a good contract, one that you're never going to have to look at. But I mean, is the industry set up to achieve that? Because it just feels like what my experience in Canada is that there's too much money to be made from keeping the lawyers involved in the process, rather than, yeah, we've written the contract, now let the companies get on with the hard work of getting the collaboration working.
Yeah, no, I think the answer is you're absolutely right, and it sort of comes back to our point about A, systems, B, agency problem, and C, this in-house legal thing. And I've got a theory I'm working on, which is a little bit derived from Yuval Harari's idea about that crops domesticated humans and not the other way around. Yeah, and which is a great idea, and I think you can make a case that lawyers domesticated the commercial markets, and rather than the commercial markets cultivating lawyers, you know, that they serve to keep the lawyers happy, and so this arrival of this class of internal corporate lawyers is just manna from heaven if you're a lawyer, right? Because now your interface with the corporates is a lawyer. The lawyer has also got an interest in proving her worth and showing how good she is by making a difference. And so these two constituencies talk to each other in this, you know, impossible to understand language, and tell you about these terrible things that could happen if you're not careful. Right.
But you also deal in a whole kind of nested multiplicity of hypotheticals, don't you?
Yes.
Which potentially has it's potentially infinite. I've been going through a process of setting up a trust. I'll be helping my dad buy a house for my brother, so we set up a trust. And I've reviewed lots of technical documents in my time. I'm pretty good at it. I received this draft trust document, And Marianne and I sat through it, and we literally couldn't understand what the hell it was on about. So,
Yeah.
and I like to
So-
understand things. So we had a meeting with the lawyers who drafted it, and she just about understood it. I said, "Why is it written like that?" They said, "Oh, a load of people got together and they wrote. This is the one that they start
Precedent.
with, the copper plate job, and it's just terrible." And I did it using ChatGPT, and I was very tempted to go with the ChatGPT version because it was like a tenth as long, didn't deal with all the hypothetical cases I didn't give a damn about, and I could understand it.
Yeah.
But I just had that element of risk and fear, and
well, that's what they're training on.
It wasn't worth taking that risk. Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
they're training on. That's what they're training on. They're relying on you having that element of risk. And look, in a way, coming back to your first comment about you're a technical guy and you like, and science has to work in a certain way. I think an element of this is law having a little bit of science envy. And so what commercial lawyers try to do is to articulate every possible forward contingency that could happen. If this, then that. If this, then that. If this, then that.
Yeah.
Regardless of how likely they are, because remember, these people are trained in the law and the logic of the law, not the probabilities of commercial reality. And so they don't have a view on whether this is likely to happen or that's likely to happen. And so I have this exact problem with the derivatives and the structured capital markets documents that I deal with as well. We have a trade that's essentially really simple, and we find hundreds of pages of just people saying, what happens if this is stolen and this system breaks down and this person needs to do that, and these are contingencies which are just never going to happen. And the reality is you've got two commercial parties who want to work with each other. If these contingencies do happen, they'll get together and figure it out.
Right.
You don't need to solve it all.
Yes. It is fascinating because there's exact parallels with designing a computer system, because I used to work on computer systems for the emergency services, and if you want to ring up the police or the ambulance, you want it to work 24/7, 365. So the customers were obviously worried about that as well, and they used to write contracts, and they used to get a team of non-technical people to write the specifications, saying, "Oh, if this happens and this happens," and every time they put another spec in there, they made our job harder, made it more expensive, and you got to the stage that because they'd also specified various penalties if you didn't meet these things, like the availability stats, that we just used to be looking at. Well, it's impossible to do what they're saying, because if their requirement is it never breaks ever and you can upgrade it without, these things are done now by pouring hundreds of £1 million into these systems, but back in our time it was quite hard to do. And there was no mechanism there to say every time you put an extra requirement in, it's putting, we know, I knew they put loads of stuff they didn't need. But the game was, oh, look how big this is. We've done a really good job. So it's just measuring the wrong thing.
I think the irony for me in all that is that if you understood complex systems, you would know that you can never see what's inside the black box. You've got to treat it as a black box that you'll never know all the details of, and work with that appropriately. There's no such thing as the right answer in a complex system. I wonder, Olly, is that one of the reasons why you got yourself interested in complex systems, or so where does that come from?
Because that's a great question, and I think that's exactly right. So I start off from the point where I'm fundamentally lazy, right, and I'm easily bored, and I found myself by unlucky hat in a profession where there's a lot of long, boring, tedious things where they're obviously stupid, right? Where the structure of something has been done the way it's always been done for the last 40 years, and it just is that way. Don't argue about it. And it's
I know what you mean, because I'll sometimes spend more time to invent a way of stopping doing the boring stuff, whereas other people just say, "Oh, just get on with it."
Yeah.
You can relate to that,
and
yeah.
that's, you know, if I've got a superpower in my career, and to be honest, my career has not been that spectacular, so probably I haven't, but if I do have a superpower, it is that ability to go, okay, I'm actually going to spend 5 hours now fixing this, even though I could just go, oh, whatever, and move on, because I know that if I fix this now, it will be fixed for good, and that will make my life easier. And it's always brought me more time down the track. And so I'm just always been interested in, you know, how things work. And, you know, you read, you know, the popular science books of the likes of Rory Sutherland and, you know, James C. Scott and people like this. And yeah, you sort of stumble on these ideas of, you know, systems theory. And I think I stumbled across James, what's his name? The Systemantics, the Systems Bible. John Gall, is it? John Gall? Which is just a tremendous book, and it's funny, you know, and you know, there are some of these sort of, you know, like the Peter Principle and Parkinson's Law and these things, which are ostensibly just a funny read, but they tell you deep truths about human nature and about how we organize ourselves. And I just, you know, the more you think, oh, I've read a couple of those, I want to read more. You just keep going at it.
Is that the origins then of the Jolly Contrarian? When I first saw the title, I'm thinking, yeah, there's somebody who's understood the George Bernard Shaw quote of, you know, if you want to tell people the truth, make them laugh. And I think you've got a great tone, and, you know, it's, you know, you combine beauty of that humor with a great insight.
Yeah. So okay. So that's more or less right. So I started out with I'm also hopelessly disorganized, scatterbrained. You're lucky that I remembered to turn up on this call, because honestly, you can tell me something else, I'll definitely do it. 5 minutes later, I'm completely like a goldfish, hopeless. And so I'm dealing with these, you know, particularly the ISDA master agreement. And so the first thing I did with the ISDA master agreement is rewrote the whole thing from scratch in plain English, just stripped it down. It took me about 4 weeks. I did this in 1995 or something like that.
Right.
And then I think, I've got all this stuff, I need to keep it somewhere. And I discovered about, you know, not long after that, you know, 2000, 2002, Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia is just as brilliant. Oh, you can edit it yourself. You know, this is like Web 2.0, how exciting. And I can just put something and it's there. It's on the internet. Like, this is amazing. And I was thinking, God, this Wikipedia thing's really cool. And at the same time, I was thinking, oh, man, and you can create your own articles on it and, you know, do all this. And where do I keep all this stuff about how to close out an ISDA master agreement? Because it's a real bastard of a thing to remember to do. There's 15 steps. It's way over engineered. It's mad, and the whole thing. And I was like, if only I had something like Wikipedia. I obviously can't put it on Wikipedia because some busybody could. But Wikipedia's got, you know, the software behind Wikipedia is also open source and is written by a community exactly the same way as a thing. So and you can download it and install it. And I installed it on a computer at home and got this thing going. It's like, oh, this is amazing. But then I realized that I needed it when I was at work, because, you know, there's like, oh, so I actually at first I got them to install it on a dev server. I don't know how I managed to convince somebody to do this at an investment bank. They did put it on a dev server, and so we had it internally at the place. But then I left, and I sort of thought, well, I'll just, you know, I took a flat file of whatever I had there, and at this point I just thought, I'll just stick it up on the internet, and it will be there, and I'll just that's where I will go, and I'll read and write from that every day. And just to answer you think about the humor, well, that was okay. So like most of us, I'm a frustrated writer. Everyone wants to have published a novel, can't get more than 15 pages done, and I lose interest because of my thing. But I knew that if I was going to be doing this this writing, it had to be something that was interesting and entertaining to me. So I'm writing purely to entertain myself. Like, there's all manner of in-jokes and stupid things in there that no one will ever see, but I don't care, because I wrote them for me. And it really suits my scatterbrain way of short attention span. I'm all over the place, because you can just write something, 5 lines, 5 minutes, done. leave it and it's there, and you can come back and find it later. And so it's a really good way of silting. I say it silts up. It's like it's accretive.
So Ollie, I'm guessing you've come a long way, because I bet in your first interview to be a lawyer, you didn't say you were a right scatterbrain.
I didn't say it, Mike, but I knew it.
But yeah, I bet you did your best to conceal it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you must have had a certain degree of success to be able to say that.
So what's your perception of the rest of the legal profession and how it reads and sees the Jolly Contrarian?
It's pretty good. Okay, so one of the things I'm often worried about is whether ISDA's the International Swaps Dealers Association, or Securities Derivative, I can't remember what it's called. They're the people that publish all this derivative stuff that I put up there, and I often wondered whether they'd give me a bit of grief about putting so much of this stuff up. Now the thing is, it's very clearly the way I presented it. It's only for information. You couldn't use it for the to create your own ISDA agreement or anything like that. But I was always a little bit nervous because they're quite aggressive about their copyright, and they charge a lot for their copyright. But I gather that they find it quite a useful resource internally. So I think I'm okay, and I've got one or two contacts in the main law firms, and they're pretty consistent. I think it's got quite a lot of use, particularly the junior law. It's quite explanatory and does it gets into the weeds of why is this weird thing here, in a way that a lot of normal legal textbooks tend not to. They're quite positivist. They tell you this is what it is, what it does.
Well, they don't leave open
they
questions.
Don't say why.
Yeah.
And like, what's another way could you have done? Does it make a difference if it's not there? And so I tend to be a little bit more explanatory about it, and I think people probably find that quite useful.
Yeah, so, I also get the sense that you run towards the difficult stuff, which I think it's core to our business. When I'm helping companies to innovate, then innovation is basically find the contradictions, solve the contradictions, and so unless you can get people to run towards the things that are blocking them, then you're not going to end up making any money and innovating. But I think particularly in the US, I sense that people just don't want to go there. They don't want to address the difficult questions. They don't want to ask the why questions. But there's again, without it, then you're not going to make any progress. I mean, is that something that's in your thinking as well?
I think that's right, and I think there's an awful lot of fear and imposter syndrome in the financial services industry and the legal industry. I'm sure in every industry, and we see more and more of that, and particularly as it's become sort of more and more of a military industrial complex. What's happened is that these contracts have been outsourced and juniorized and sent down to people that are much more junior and much less experienced because they're cheaper. And I've got my views about that. On the one hand, these guys are my audience, right? So I care deeply about them, and I'm really grateful for them. But I do wonder sometimes whether you could have achieved this, if you had more experienced people doing this stuff that could actually make decisions and didn't need this, enormous siloized distributed control function, then you would get better outcomes. And that's possibly one of the explanations of the post office thing as well. They're just everyone's just got they're very compartmentalized, very afraid. They don't really understand anything except what's on the playbook on the lap in front of them. So they're unlikely to call up. They'll send an email rather than call up. And so things get very, because if you communicate with someone by email in a contentious manner, rather than just memorializing what you've agreed, if you're actually saying, I think this, they get their backs up. This thing just escalates. It's an incredibly inefficient way of negotiating. So I mean, one of our big themes, I would say, for the last 12 months has been
horizontal wisdom, which is if you're the innovator again, you need to be able to connect the dots between all those verticals that don't understand each other.
Yeah.
And I very often see that the legal framework actually very often prevents those communications from taking place. And it just feels to me like you can't innovate without having those horizontal skills. But if you haven't got lawyers who can think horizontally also, then the whole system becomes locked in, I think.
Yeah.
And so does it feel like you're winning that battle to break down some of those silo walls and to
It doesn't, if I'm honest. But I'm feeling that I'm at least having the satisfaction of saying my piece and hollering into the gale and whatnot. So I can feel at least like I've had a good old shout, even though nothing's changed. I mean, that thing about horizontal conversations is absolutely spot on. And I remember seeing another couple of guys from the Real World Institute, whose names escape me now, we're talking about this in a long podcast, and this idea of formal versus informal communications. And your formal ones are the ones that follow the organization chart, and they tend to be vertical, right? And these are the ones that get documented and that get seen and that are in board papers and minutes and stuff like that. But these are the ones that are just sort of reporting from the sentry, sir, all correct, sir, nothing to see here, sir. Whereas when the machine's in, when the gears are engaged, when it's moving somewhere, where it's actually engaging with clients or the enemy or whatever it is, the communications matter are horizontal ones that go across silos and leave the organization and go outside. And these are informal, and they're not tracked, and they're not part of any package, and they're absolutely the things without which the organization just wouldn't function. It's extraordinary, that we so mischaracterize that.
I'm hearing more and more the expression commander's intent in leadership circles of so we've got the formal, this is what we want you to achieve, but then give people the autonomy to work out for themselves how they're going to achieve it. I mean, it feels to me like if the legal profession had that kind of philosophy, then we'd all be a lot better off. I mean, are there signs that things are moving that direction? I mean, clearly reading your work, it feels like that's where we should be going. But is there a will there, do you think?
So a lot of my direct experience is in the corporate world rather than specifically in the legal one. Interestingly enough, legal firms traditionally have always been a much flatter structure than corporations. There's 50 partners and a bunch of associates, and that's kind of it. And although my sense is that they are becoming more corporatized, and there's a CEO and there's a marketing officer, and they're becoming more vertical. And I certainly don't see the banks and the large corporates becoming any less vertical. So look, there's just interesting examples that we've seen recently. The collapse of Credit Suisse was a pretty good one. There was a hedge fund that collapsed a little bit before that called A.K.A, and you could just see a lot of what went wrong was just bad, organizational structures and just the sclerotic institution just not working as it would do if you empowered the people on the at the coalface, the subject matter experts, to actually make decisions.
Yeah. So I mean, if there's any kind of consensus in the corporate world, it feels like in a turbulent market, the only survival strategy you can depend on is agility and flexibility. And again, that feels kind of like the opposite to what most of the legal profession is there to do. So you've got the contradiction of I need agility. However, I've got all these contracts that I've signed with suppliers and customers, etc., etc. And how on earth am I supposed to be adaptable in that kind of environment?
Tablets of stone.
Yeah, and the thought leadership in the legal industry is really distressing because it's just all going the wrong way. And again, it comes back a little bit to this science envy, Mike, and they want to be technologists and they want to be seen to innovate and they want to be seen to be brilliant. And so what they're doing is running hard at technology and saying, okay, we've got this legal process which is expensive. Let's just drop technology on top of it, and even AI, God help us, to make it better. But what is that if you take a bad process and impose technology
That
are
makes it even
just-
less agile.
Yeah, you just
Yeah.
ossify
Yeah.
it. It's stuck.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
no
yeah.
way you can change it now. It's got a layer of tech on the top of it, which you're going to have to talk to the CIO about changing. And it's just mad. And like my thing has always been, look, we are experts. The first thing you should do is take that trust deed that someone's prepared 50 years ago, which is an absolute disaster, and fix it. Make it 2 pages long, make it easier. And if you do all that sort of stuff, hey presto, you don't need the lawyers, you don't need the technology, you don't need any of this stuff. It just works better but you need to trust your guys at the on the production line. Your Toyota, what's that word in the Toyota production system for the automation with a human touch? So you let the people on the production line make things work for them. But there's just very little trust in the
people. Give them a red cord that can stop the production line if things are going wrong.
Yeah, but also make suggestions on how to make it better.
Right. So continuing on the kind of science envy type thing. So you've got the financial traders, derivative people, and you've got the lawyers alongside them. And I'm kind of interested in contrasting those two cultures because, again, from my tabloid information, I get the feeling that the financial guys, they've just got lots of money, and they're not ossified. They're in a seething pit of competition, and they'll get physicists and bloody they'll apply science and technology to the nth degree. And you hear about their kind of putting in shoring the length of fiber cables to increase the information flow by kind of a millionth of a second, that kind of thing. So in the same, you haven't contradicted me yet, so maybe that kind of gross characterization has got some truth in it. And then you've got the legal law system, which has been going forever. They kind of, what was it that the government just put in a bloody law about bicycles? Did you catch that?
No, missed that.
Because the Conservatives hate cyclists, as a matter of principle. So, and they had Chris Boardman, who won a load of gold medals because, basically, if the Daily Mail runs something, Rishi Sunak will pick it up and make it into a law or something, or make a speech about it. So they were complaining that somebody got killed by a cyclist. And they prosecuted him using a 1830 law of something to do with carriages in a reckless manner or something like that. And Chris Boardman was on, and he said, there's 3 people being killed in the last year or something by cyclists, including electrical cyclists. Yeah. Whereas, you're getting 10 people killed every day by cars. And it's just the priorities are so wrong. But the reason I brought it up is that you've got Parliament and the legal system applying laws about horses and carriages, and it just kind of seems to drive home that you've got this absolute barnacles or baggage to the nth degree, and then you've got an educational system that that teaches you that religion of, if you can quote something that some old geezer used to live in a manor in Surrey or whatever said 30 years ago, and everyone said, "Oh, that's good," that is relevant to your world. And that sounds like some sort of horrible tyranny to me. But anyway, sort of the question was, do you see a difference of culture between the legal world and the financial world?
Yeah, I mean, they do different things. So those high frequency trading guys that you talk about, their use of lawyers is quite different. So they'll spend a lot of time getting their regulatory advice pinned down. That, can I do this? Can I do this in this jurisdiction? If I sell to this guy over here, can I do it? And once that's sorted, then they just it's all about throwing more blade servers at it and having faster processing time and having just more processing capacity. And so once they're up and running, they don't have a lot of they don't have a lot
So
of
they kind of
interest.
nail down the machine, because once they're going, that's their playground, and then
Yeah.
the law's done and dusted. We can now play,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
And yeah, so the my cynical view is that the law works on a basis of percentage of value, right? So the more money is being shifted around, the more somebody is going to be prepared to pay to ensure that everything goes fine and doesn't go wrong. And so so if you're doing the private equity industry has been the real leader of the legal industry for the last 5 years or so, and that's what's generated these massive salaries at Linklaters, because the private equity firms just do these enormous deals, and the private equity advisors that do the deals for them could just go, well, I recorded 500,000, but I reckon I did a pretty good deal for you, so why don't we call it $1.5 million? And the private, fine, whatever. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, okay. So what I know you haven't said is, I can look down the corridor and I can see the way the guys there are behaving, and I wish I had some of that. I wish us in the legal world were, that's a potential direction we could learn lessons from. We're not saying that at all.
So, yeah, I just think that they're sort of different ecosystems, and they tick over with different, there's different interests, aligned and built into them. But for sure, there is an element of commercial law which is just tremendously old-fashioned and stuck in the past. Now, an example I'll give you is I've recently been involved with creating a bond program for companies to create issue bonds, debt instruments into the market, and we wanted to make this as slim and as quick and as streamlined as possible, because the cost of issuing these bonds would be 40-50 grand every time you do one. And so we took the traditional bond issuance, and it's predicated on these bonds being security printed like banknotes with little coupons, literally perforated coupons attached to the side for interest, and they expect that you as a bondholder will take your security printed bond with its coupons, tear one and go to a bank in Luxembourg, go to the counter and present your coupon to the counter.
Yeah.
And like, this hasn't happened in 50 years. It's all electronically cleared. It's never, there's just no possibility of that ever happening anymore. Yet there are all of these provisions in the bond documentations about what happens if you spill coffee on your bond, or you burn it, or and all this nonsense. And what happens if someone doesn't turn up after 5 years and they haven't presented their coupon, and so because you don't know who to pay it to, and they're just solving all of these problems that just do not exist anymore. And so we went to the lawyers and said, we just want to get rid of all of that. Can we get rid of all of that? And they went, yeah, I suppose so. And so we went from a document that was 430 pages long to one that's 70 pages long. Just as
So
it's crazy. But no one's done it. And it took, I work for a very small firm now, and no one's done it. No one's thought to do it. Yet these banks are issuing billions and billions of dollars of these bonds every day, and paying 40 grand to go for it every time they do it. It's just don't understand.
It's an example of barnacles. One of the favourite metaphors is your use of barnacles.
Yeah.
It's again in innovation world. I see everywhere. I mean, is that a battle that's easier to win? I mean, you just give us a lovely illustration of debarnacling.
It's so hard to do, Darrell. It's so hard to do, because you've just got so many people that go, look, it works. Don't
Yeah.
No, just don't leave it. Just don't. I don't want to think about it. It's too hard. And like most people, particularly in-house lawyers, then they're not getting paid. You know, they're not the rainmakers, right? They're a cost in an organization. They just want an easy life. They want to have enough to do so that they can, you know, knock off at 6 o'clock or 6:30 at night. So they're obviously doing something, but they don't want any more than that. They don't want to have to think too hard about things. And so, of course, and the other classic is, of course, you have a problem. And there's a guy called Jason Fried who wrote a book called Rework. And he came up with this brilliant quote, which was, policy is institutional scar tissue, right? And so there is so much scar tissue. So you're doing a deal and then something that you weren't expecting happens and it goes absolutely haywire. And someone says, how do we fix that? We must do this. Then
I was talking about all those hypotheticals, all these things that go wrong. So there's a massive spectrum of them.
Yeah.
And then for a period of time, you know, some of them actually materialize.
Right.
Those are more important than all the other ones, even though they've got exactly the same probability. So those are the ones you bedded in concrete. And you say, I've got experience because this happened to me. And this contract will protect that from happening again.
Oh, you hear that all the time. But even worse than that, you get the situation which is, you know, and I had this at an organisation. I'm careful never to mention the organisations I work for to protect their identity as much as mine. And I inherited a business covering the prime brokerage business, and they have a contract, and this contract was just ghastly. And I said, what does this mean? This bit, can we change this bit? I don't understand it. Can we change this bit? And they went, oh no, can't change that. It says, why not? No, you can't change it. What does it mean? Don't know, but you can't change it. And so there was just this, and I had to get to a point, and I sort of took a fair bit of personal capital on the line and said, look, unless someone can tell me a reason why this is here, it's going, okay? We'll go and ask everyone, but someone's got to come up. But what's of course happened is whoever came up with that idea, they're long gone, you know, they've moved to a different firm or whatever. And it's just so much of that rubbish.
So the parallels with software are, they just
no
spot on, because you've had lots of people over a period of maybe 10 years all doing that little bits for requirements that half of them the customer doesn't want, and then they've left, and then somebody says, oh, we can't release the system because this bit's broken. And what does this bit do? Does anyone want it? Does anyone know what it is? So you almost
legal contracts are
take
human
it out
software,
and see if anyone complains.
right. Legal contracts are human software. It's exactly the same. So whilst you see them being quite different, there are great crossovers between tech and legal for sure.
Yeah, well, if I can make another parallel, I think I see the same thing with hospital trusts in the UK, where again, it's just barnacles everywhere. And as soon as you quiz people that, why is this here? Nobody knows the answer. And so when you try and dig into these things, it's because something happened 15 years ago, and we can't have that happen again. So therefore, we'll write a new line of
there's also
procedure.
Barnacles is maybe not the right word, because you get people who defend these things because this is the way we've always done it. I don't want change, and it's almost like the barnacles bite back.
Well, you've just described the doctrine of precedent, right? That's how the law works. This is the way we've always done it. Do what you did before.
I think just going back to the medical industry and pharma in particular, pharma periodically goes through these crises periods where you say, this legislation is just utterly unworkable. Now we're just going to have to start again, just bomb the whole thing and start again. And perhaps they've got the money to do that. Perhaps they've just got the.
So Darrell, sorry
desire.
Is that like? Because I was looking for a analogy, because the other trouble you get with software is the technology changes and say, oh shit, we have to write in a different language, and it's a bit analogous to that.
I think the common principle for me is it's a cliche, but don't let the crisis go to waste. So you use the crisis to say, okay, now I've got an opportunity to get rid of all this stuff and begin with something like a blank piece of paper, go back to core principles, which I think is where you started the conversation, Ollie. of let's just think about what the function of this thing is.
Yeah.
But I mean, waiting for a crisis is, I think, fairly traumatic for people having to work in the system. But I mean,
another thing, I think people have also got fear of their own redundancy. And I've actually had conversations with saying, why do we do this? And they said, because I won't have anything to do then.
Yeah.
Which is, and you sort of understand that. But my experience has been whenever you put through these simplifications, and I've done it in a few different organizations, inevitably things go through quicker. People think, oh, that's amazing. And so volumes tick up, just spike. And so no one's ever out of a job. There's always more to do. And even if there isn't, people go, oh, that's a fantastic job you've done there. Can you come and solve this one now too?
Right.
Yeah. So Darrell, you're the expert in this, but I think the legal, I know there's lots of different bits, but the legal profession is at the top of an S curve, big time, I would say. Would you agree?
I would, yes. So when you combine a few hundred years worth of precedent, then
So I was just thinking for your audience, Ollie, all these young lawyers, what I'd be thinking here is, well, there's two ways of looking at this. One is, oh my goodness, I don't want to go into this environment because you've got this just growing system that is essentially a cancer on society, because it's taken more and more resources and more very intelligent people and not producing the same output for all this extra investment. Yeah. So what I'd be thinking is, my goodness, there's so much fat there to be trimmed. If we can do that, if we can do what you've been doing systematically, using the new technology in the right way, we could really make a killing. Is that not true?
Well, there's a lot of people trying that, right? So there's
so how are they getting on?
There's a big industry of alternative legal process providers. Legal tech is huge. And I've on the blog, I've got a page of all of the legal tech firms that I've come across. I've borrowed some of them off conferences that I'm on, and there's 300-400 of them doing various things, and that's just the ones I know about. And there's so much scope for consolidation. I think it's just unsustainably small scale, like these little cottage industries at the moment. And I think there's so many people, and like there are legal thought leaders. There's a guy called Richard Susskind, who's an academic that's always talking about the end of lawyers, and everything's going to change, and it just isn't changing that quickly at all. I know a couple of people that run really good legal outsourcing firms that have done really impressive stuff, but they just don't make a dent. And like I had an opportunity recently to set up a legal practice, which would be a sort of a challenger legal practice in the investment banks. And I called a couple of my contacts in the firms and said, look, if I did this, would you pick up the phone? And they said, we've got this legal panel that we're committed to, and we probably couldn't. Or you have to onboard, KYC would take 6 months, and this sort of stuff. And just I think the problem is that the system is so entrenched, and there's it's like a paradigm, right? Like Thomas Kuhn. There's so many. It's functioning like it is, and whatever comes and displaces it is going to have to be an order of magnitude better somehow. And it's not clear that that's there yet. Certainly the legal tech just doesn't do the job. This AI, it really isn't coming up so much.
I think if you apply a layer of technology onto the same basic principles, then you've just, as you I think said earlier, you just locked in the system now, because nobody understands the technology or the principles anymore. Mike said something earlier about I nearly would set up this trust using GPT. I mean, does the crisis come from people, your customers, who say, you know what, I'm just not going to pay those fees. I'm going to do it myself, use GPT, things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a disruption threat, do you think?
Yeah, I think around the edges it certainly is.
Yeah.
So the other thing is, I really do think now that the law firms have overshot with the amount that they're paying their junior lawyers, and they're going to really find themselves in a bind because people are just going to suddenly say, I'm just not paying for the poor quality. I'm not paying this much anymore. So the thing about ChatGPT is it's fantastic for doing stuff that doesn't really matter. Writing, like writing. I had to put I probably shouldn't say this just because in case anyone's listening. I had to do a health and safety and employment policy. Brilliant, done in like 30 seconds, and that's done. And look, the grim reality, and no lawyer will admit this, possibly except me, is a lot of what lawyers do doesn't matter. So if you can find a way of tackling that with ChatGPT, it will just go away as a thing to do. I don't think anyone will make any money out of it, by the way. It's a little bit like, that email and that, email killed the Royal Mail service and that sort of stuff. I don't think anyone's meaningfully made money out of email per se, right? There's another, it's just a cost that tended to zero and went away. And I suspect that's the effect that ChatGPT is going to get rid of chaff. But what it also allows is you to make things more complicated. And, you go further down that oubliette, Mike, that you were talking about of, contingencies and solving every possible thing. If you look at the average length of a commercial contract in 1970 and the average length of a commercial contract in 2020, I guarantee it's not shorter now. Because of all the technology makes it's so much easier just to create guff. I think ChatGPT just enables you to make more guff. And if you can complicate stuff enough that people go, oh, I don't know, I understand.
So continuing the software analogy, have contracts been modularized? So can you put them together with a load of subsystems?
Yeah, you'd be amazed. And so there have been certain localized efforts to modularize things. So the ISDA, which is my derivatives one, is a classic case. 1987, I think the first one was done, and they sort of said, okay, this is a market this is a new market. We hadn't thought about doing this before, creating these derivative contracts. So what we're going to do is create a contract, which just means you can do lots and lots of these things. And once you've had your negotiated contract up front, you just do lots and lots of these things really easily. And so they created this thing called a master agreement. It's a PDF document. You can't amend it. It's just 14 clauses of stuff, and you sign at the end. And then you got a little extra page after that, a schedule after that, where you can put a few little, you can customize things that, right? And so the idea was that standardizes and that modularized, and that definitely did modularize. But then what happened, of course, over the years, that schedule went from being 1 page to 2 pages, and it's some of them I've seen 50, 60 page long schedules now, and like the ISDA itself is only 14 pages long, and so you just have that effect going on. So another great example, which I think is, I'm not sure how well it's going. I don't want to run it down because I just think it's just such a fantastic effort. Was it non-disclosure agreements? So confidentiality agreements. It is mad. As an in-house, a general counsel of a small investment services firm, I see 50 of these buggers a month, right? And they are all the same, but not one is the same as the last one. And it is such a waste of time. Oh God, help me! It's all, and everyone who speaks says, "Oh God, I hate NDAs and that sort of stuff." Now, a lady by the name of Electra Japanas, who's incredible. You should get her on your podcast too. She's a fantastic person. She was running one of these legal process outsourcers. She did this thing. She looked at her whole business and said, "This is mad. 60% of my actual work is just doing NDAs, and like it's 20% of my revenue. It's mad. I've got to get rid of this. I want to be doing more interesting stuff." So she puts this thing up on LinkedIn, just to everybody saying, look, this is mad. Let's just solve this for once and for all. Who's in? And like everyone piles in, and so and Electro, she would have been early 30s at the time, wasn't from like Magic Circle firm or anything like that. Set her own business up, real single-minded.
Love
and
it.
she had, I kid you not, Slaughter and May, she had Herbert Smith, and she had all of the all of these people. She had Coca-Cola, she had UBS, she had Barclays, everybody all collaborating on this thing. And she did this great thing. She said, okay, we're going to make this plain and it's going to be simple. So she got 6 law firms in, and she said, you're all going to draft a confidentiality agreement clause by clause, and you're all going to put your clauses to the collective, and we're going to vote on the one that we like best. And we want it to be short.
Lovely.
I mean, what a fantastic idea that is, right?
Yeah.
And so they came
with
back,
the egos.
and so the contract that came back, we went through this. It's called one NDA, and the thing is, like, it's like just over a page long, and it's done. And you just put your name and address at the top, and who the other guy is, and what your project is, and you sign it, and it's done. And it's just fabulous. But okay, so here's the mystery, and everyone signed up. So Barclays Investment Bank had done it. Rolls Royce, I think there are all sorts of people on it. But the mystery, it hasn't taken over the whole market. So in my business, I see 50 NDAs in 50 a month, I'd say, for the last 2 years. I've not seen it once. And I don't understand that, except that, I'm special. And I don't want to premium mediocre sort of thing. I've got to have a special one with my special little extra bits in it. And it's so disappointing. But
I mean, one of the things that you've written about is anti-fragility, and it just feels again like that. Those kind of specialness mistakes just make organisations more fragile. So you think you're doing a good thing, but in actual fact, you've made your organisation more fragile. I mean, so do you see signs that the legal profession understands anti-fragile and knows how to head in that direction, or even has a desire to head in that direction?
If they do, they don't talk about it. So I would invite you to go on LinkedIn and see the thought leadership in the legal department, in the legal industry there, but it would just distress you so much, unless you're the sort that likes rubbernecking at car crashes and stuff like that. It's terrible, and it's just so unimaginative, and so no one's really talking about complexity. No one's really talking about. There's one or two people are, but again, they don't get a great deal of traction. But everyone's on about AI, and
So going back to the education system, it has. Anti-fragile complexity of any of these things made any inroad? I mean, if I was studying law today, could I do courses in that, or is it the same as?
So I'm an odd fish, as I think you said, in that I studied my law on the other side of the world, and so I don't have direct experience of the system here. But I believe you do not need to do much legal training at university at all. I think you can just do a degree in the liberal arts and a 1-year conversion course, and then you're into your training contract. And so that's, and the training contract is all very very sort of vocational. So I'm not sure, but again, as I say, I think that the threads of the marketplace of ideas, if you like, that are infecting legal are not really Taleb and Rory Sutherland and behavioral economics. They're more McKinsey,
right.
And that sort of, I call it data modernism, that idea that tech can just solve everything and that there will never be any questions, and that we can protect everything. So I think the things that get people jazzed in the legal industry are not the things that get me jazzed, and I wonder whether they're missing a trick.
Okay, I'm gonna let Darrell have a go at patents in a minute, but going back to accountability, my view of things from the tabloid world again is that I've never known a law firm or a big accountancy firm who comes and validates somebody's accounts at the end of the year, do they have any responsibility? Do they ever suffer the consequences of basically they can do what the hell they like and they get away with it? Is that true?
That's a great question. I think the accountants have had a bit more stick, auditors particularly in recent times.
Well, only because they've been appallingly bad,
I saw a
stellarly bad.
statistic that there was something like 75% of the firms that blew up got clean audits the year before they blew up or something like that. It was just a statistic the other day. So I think there's been a bit of tension on the auditing firms. I really don't think the law firms have. And again, financial services is my thing. And on the blog I run with my list of tech firms, I've got my roll of honor of financial disasters, and they just keep coming. Enron, Lehman, Amaranth, 1MDB, you name it, and they just keep coming. And every and nobody ever seems to learn from them, and none of the law firms ever seem to be penalized as a result of it. So it's never the law firm's fault, even though the law firm, all of these deals, I don't know, all the stuff that Lehman did, Repo 105, all that stuff, it was all done with legal advice and legal opinions, and it was wrong, but it just somehow,
the lawyers are like the jackals that come in when these big beasts die. They feed off the remains, don't they?
Yeah. So
does that feed into
a little bit like it's the shoe that hasn't dropped. If you look through the financial crisis, banks have rocked back, and investment funds and everybody else has really had to take a step back. And the amount of the money they can make, the law firms just sort of proceeded merrily on.
And they want to sweep away all the regulations they put in place after the disasters.
But I'm just wondering whether it's another of the Caleb things, which is if there's no skin in the game, then there's no imperative to change, is there? And it feels like what you described as a legal profession that, for the most part, doesn't have skin in the game.
Right, and look, people are still paying them, right? And I joke about the legal opinion. I joke about it is a 75-page long disclaimer of liability, and they'll charge you for
it. Genius, absolute genius. So Darrell, riff on.
Well, I'm conscious that
to destroy the patent system. I had to stop it.
I still do want to destroy the patent system, but I'm just conscious of the time, Ollie. So we've taken up a lot of your time, but maybe a way of closing things out is that we spend most of our time in innovation world helping companies to innovate, and I think we see a patent system which now impedes innovation rather than promotes it. So it's almost like the system now does the exact opposite of what it was set up to do. So set up to give them a monopoly to the lone inventor. Now I've been involved in a number of court cases where the lone inventor has had their IP willfully copied by a big company, and big companies known that. There's not the small companies can do anything about this. You need $1 million just to start a case against us, and you're not going to find that money. I just wonder if there's I know you're in a different part of the legal profession, but if there's any kind of view in the profession that's innovation and the legal world are antagonistic to one another. Let's put it that way.
So intellectual property just generally is an interesting thing. I can probably speak a bit more about IP generally in the sense of copyright and trademarks and patents to an extent, and specifically about patents is actually an entirely different industry. Of patent attorneys are not, and lawyers are fish and eels or something like that. That's a bad analogy.
Look over that one.
I mean, so I think the thing about intellectual property generally is it was something that was formulated in the analog era, right, where the substrate of intellectual property was embedded, intellectual property is embedded in a substrate paper ordinarily, and it was impossible to get it out. And so what they had in mind is people manually copying things, and it made some sense in that circumstance. Now text is free. It just doesn't work anymore. Like, you know, things are copyright around the whole place, and it, you know, it feels a lot more, and with a networked internet where there is a real winner takes all ethos about things, and the person that gets to the top of the tree just owns everything. You know, it's naturally monopolistic, and so having intellectual property laws which are naturally monopolistic things as well is just, you know, a system effect.
It reinforces another feedback.
Going the wrong way,
right.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, being a blog, you know, a blogger, I'm putting a lot of intellectual property up there. I'm probably borrowing a fair bit too, and putting other people's intellectual property up. But I just think, you know, it's a much better place to be if everyone can share alike, and you know, you should be earning your keep. And I'll give you a musical example. The Rolling Stones wrote Satisfaction in 15 minutes. Apparently Keith was asleep when he wrote it, and Steve was and Mick Jagger was like by a poolside in LA with chicks, right, while he was writing the lyrics and stuff. And yet that 15 minutes earns them however many millions of quid every year, and whatever they do. And it's great they're touring again, by the way. I'm really pleased about that. But it feels to me like you should make your money by touring, you know, bending your back, getting out there and actually doing stuff, producing more stuff. And so any sort of a system which says, okay, this is mine, I've got it, I'm just gonna monetize that from now on, it's just a bad thing. So Cory Doctorow wrote a really interesting article about the you know, AI versus copyright and where the artists and all of this. And he made a point which was very similar to yours, Darrell, which is that, look, if we think that copyright is protecting the lone blogger and, you know, the lone inventors and people like that were dreaming, all the copyright's owned by corporates. They've already got monopolies. It's just giving them more monopolies. And so, you know, I think the sooner we get over this idea of copyright, the better.
Yeah, I have my hopes open for China, because I think China doesn't understand culturally intellectual property. And I've certainly had people that have come up to me and they've taken, I can see big chunks of my book, and they've changed a couple of things, and they've come up to me and said, "Look, I've improved your book for you." And you know, it's not about copying me; it's, you know, they're honouring the original intent, and, you know, have that spirit of, you know, improvement of things. But I think it's innovation in China is, you are going to be copied, so your only way of staying ahead is to keep innovating, and that feels to me like the right way of doing things.
Marvelous. So we're all agreeing on stuff.
We are, so we've got absolute consensus.
So we bring yet another episode of Danger Mouth to an end. Very good one. So thank you very much, Ollie. It's been a real pleasure having you on board. I have to get you back if you've got any cool ideas that you'd like to discuss.
I'd love that.
Give us an email.
It will be great.
Look, thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been great insight. Thanks for your time, Ollie, and keep fighting the good fight. One day we'll win.
Yeah, cheers. And you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Cheers then.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, stay on, Ollie. Stay on. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.